You're new here, welcome. My name is Sarah and you're watching Adventures with the Herberts. I try and upload once a week on a Sunday evening, and today I'm going to talk about my top 10 tips for flying with children. I've been going to Walt Disney World since 1997. I've flown many times with very small children, with toddlers and older children, so there's things that I've learned along the way that help pacify a child during the flight or entertain them. And obviously if you're doing long haul flights, really important that you've got things available to do to keep your child amused. So let's get started. So tip one would be actually thinking about seats. Although most airlines at the moment actually charge you for requesting your seats, my advice would be, having flown a long haul flight with a small child under my knee, I believe you don't need to pay for a seat until they're over the age of 2, but I've actually flown 9 hours with a child on my seat, and unfortunately there was no spare seats around us during that flight. It can be really difficult when you've got a very tired toddler and you've got nowhere to actually put them other than on your knee. So with my experience, I would always recommend, if you can afford to, I would get an extra seat for the child, and then if they do fall asleep, you've actually got somewhere where you can lay them down. You know, with the seats being more expensive, the other option would be to see if there is an available seat nearby. So for example, if you're sitting in the free, there might be a spare seat in a seat of 4, and that's always a good option. But I would always recommend either paying for a seat, asking if there's a spare seat, but always making sure that you actually book your seats, because what you don't want to do, and I've got 2 children, is end up being split up, or one parent with both children and the other parent halfway down the aeroplane, so you can't actually get any support during the flight. So again, book your seats. If you can afford to, book a spare seat for your younger child, or ask if there's a spare seat on the plane. So that's tip 1. So tip 2 would be snacks and food. So although most airlines do a really good range of children's meals, you can often be waiting quite a while before the food is being brought out, and if they don't like the food, you're left with a very hungry child who's going to be quite upset on the plane. So I always pack a big range of snacks in my carry-on bag, you know, just to make sure that obviously if you've got a child who's getting a little bit upset, you've always got something to give them to eat or to munch on, just to try and pacify them a little bit during the flight. So always make sure you've got a bag full of snacks. You probably think you don't need that many, but it's always best to take too many than not enough snacks for the flight. So that is tip 2. Tip 3 is nap time. So if you can, wherever possible, depending on what time you fly, I've always, when I've flown with very young children, always tried to keep them awake and stop them napping before getting onto the plane, and that way they're extra tired, and you can almost guarantee that they're going to drop off for a few hours on the plane to give you a little bit of a break when you're flying long haul. Obviously what you don't want to do is it have the opposite effect and you end up with an overtired child. So it's just about thinking about when you're getting on the plane, when they would normally nap, or just cutting their nap time short. But I've always found that when I've cut their nap time out and actually let them sleep on the plane, they've often got off for 3 or 4 hours, and that breaks the flight really well. Tip 4 is ears. So if you're flying with very young children, they're not able to tell you that their ears are hurting or that they're struggling with ear pressure. So make sure you've got something in your bag, such as a bottle or a dummy pacifier, or a drink, or a lollipop, something that they can actually suck on to try and even out the pressure in their ears, because it can actually be quite painful, especially in very young children. Also, some children get very frightened. It can be very noisy on a plane, especially a very busy plane. So I've used ear defenders before, especially with very young children, and that way it helps block out some of the noise and helps keep them nice and calm. My youngest does have a problem with his ears, so we have used ear defenders quite a lot, or think about about noise cancelling headphones to try and block out the noise a little bit. So that is tip 4. Tip 5, I have always, when travelled with very young children, always had a rucksack full of activities and toys that both my children hadn't seen before the flight. So every time they got a little bit fed up or a little bit bored, I could pull something out new, a new activity, a new colouring book, a new sticker book, Lego, a little small set of Lego, just so it was like them opening something new, like a little present every couple of hours. And I always found that worked really, really well because it was stuff they'd never seen before. So that just passed the time really well on the flight. And used to have a rucksack for both children that we would open once we got on the plane. So that can be a really good way of passing the time. Tip 6 is, although there's great entertainment on the plane, often it's not geared up to very, very young children, unless obviously you've got Wi-Fi, you can't sort of download Disney Plus on the plane. So make sure that you download lots and lots of programs that your child likes before you actually get on the plane. Just again, so you've got something you can actually put on to try and pacify them a little bit. So I've always taken an iPad on the plane and always downloaded lots of their favourite programs, just because, you know, if you're on a 9-hour flight, it can be a very, very long flight if you've got a child that's a little bit upset or really struggling with the long time on the plane. So making sure you've got lots of programs, things that they really enjoy, ready to go if you need to. That is also another good tip. Tip 7 is don't stress. Children will cry on the plane. Your child will not be the only child that cries on the plane. It is not the end of the world. It feels like it. I've been there myself when my child has cried for a whole hour straight, and you feel like everybody is looking at you. Really don't worry. Most people on flights are really understanding. They get that it's, you know, a long flight for children, and you often won't get any problems with anybody on the flight. But so don't get yourself stressed out if suddenly your child starts crying. They will settle down, and don't worry about what's happening around you. 8, I've got 2 children that really struggle with travel sickness, so always make sure if your child is travel sick in a car or on a boat, 9 times out of 10 they're going to be poorly on the plane. Make sure that you've got plenty of carry bags in a bag ready to go. I always find that the sick bags they provide on the plane are next to useless when you've got a child who's being unwell. So making sure you've got lots of carry bags, wipes, a set of clean clothes ready to go just in case your child is sick. There are lots of things out there that you can use these days. The bands that you can put on the wrists that can be really good, a medication that you can buy over the counter which you can give to quite young children to help settle their stomach on the plane. But again, that's where the regular snacks is really good, is with travel sickness, is actually giving them something little and often will often help settle their stomach on the plane. But it's something that a lot of children do suffer with, is being travel sickness on the plane. So be prepared and make sure that you preempt it, because the last thing you want is a child being sick over everybody on the plane, which has actually happened to me on a few occasions. So be prepared. 9 is pushchairs. So I've travelled with 2 under 5s before. Even if you've got a child that is completely out of a pushchair, when you go into somewhere like Disney, they get extremely tired, the heat gets to them, so it is worth taking a double pushchair with you, even if you've got a child that's been out of a pushchair for a while. I did when both of mine were under 5, I used to take a double pushchair. It's also worth looking into the airline as to whether you can actually take the pushchair to the gate, because if not, if you have to hand it over at check-in, you're left with 2 toddlers running about plus hand luggage, and it can become quite stressful. Whereas if you're able to put them both into a pram right up until the gate, it's a good way of, you know, managing the situation really well. And I've always when I've taken a pushchair, I've always asked to take it right to the gate and hand it over. And then when I get off the plane again, if you're going to somewhere like America, you can actually be waiting a little while once you get off the plane, so it's somewhere that you can actually put the children into the pram. They can have a little nap while you're waiting to get out of the airport and your luggage. So I would always say, if possible, think about taking a pushchair for an older child, such as a child that's just started reception, and always see if you can take the pushchair to the gate so it's there ready to use as soon as you get off the plane as well. 10 is getting off the plane. We're all going to get off the plane eventually. Don't try and rush. don't try and be the first one off. In my experience, I've always tried to wait, let everybody get off first, especially if you've got very young children. It can be very chaotic, lots of people rushing to get off the plane, and young children can get quite frightened and a bit upset about it all. So you're not going to really get there much quicker, so you might as well wait, let everybody get off, take your time, get everything together, and then slowly get off the plane. That's what I've always tried to do when I've travelled with young children, and that way you've not got that stress or panic of trying to get off the plane. So anyway, they're my 10 tips, things that I've learned with travelling with very young children. Feel free to drop any comments below. As always, if you enjoyed the vlog, please don't forget to hit the thumbs up button. It really does help out the channel. If you're new here and you've just discovered the channel, please think about subscribing. I've got lots more content to come, hopefully with a trip to Walt Disney World later this year, and a few theme parks booked in. Thanks as always for watching. I really appreciate it. Take care and I'll see you soon.